because it's a feather in the cap for the city of Nashville. And so while fans love the idea of the sport and love the sport, they're supporting it internationally, not domestically, and I don't think there's enough attention to how we fix that.
And I agree, Eric. I know you don't take an issue to this because you have referred to the league as minor league, but do you think if the NASL and the USL were more, and the other leagues weren't necessarily called minor leagues and were just called second division, do you think that would maybe change the perception among the casual fan about like maybe generating more interest within those lower leagues?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think that term minor league's been used as a weapon against us. And you know, we started this conversation. I was talking about Seamus O'Brien's ambition and where he wanted to see it go, and you know, we were obstinate not to be referred to as minor league. And I do think there's validity in what you say. I don't think it helps. It would be in everybody's best interest that we talked about divisions and growth and opportunity and not marginalize leagues and teams and clubs.
Yeah, and I think it's just so hard to imagine because although I'm right now studying at Madison, Armand and I originally come from Dallas, and obviously you had spent time with MLS, but I mean Dallas, a huge market. I mean the youth there is incredible coming out of. I mean you got players at Schalke, one at Benfica, Kellen Acosta at FC Dallas. You have this youth, but when it comes to culture in the club's direction, it's lackluster, and it makes you scratch your head, and it kind of makes you angry sometimes. It's like we should be able to sell out a 20,000 seat stadium easily. Do you feel that soccer in America is still growing? Because I've heard people, radio personalities, say soccer has come back down with the failure with the national team.
That's a really good question, and I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is growing in interest and popularity. Again, I have young kids. I drop them off at school. I see a lot more soccer jerseys than I do football jerseys, and that's in North Jersey where you've got two NFL teams, and so I do think the growth is there. I do think the gross domestic product of soccer in this country is big, but I do think most of the money is being spent on European clubs or Mexican clubs, whether it's eyeballs on television or jerseys or track jackets or whatever. But the potential is here. People do want to support their local team. It is very hard for Dallas and Red Bull, being part of the original clubs, to reinvent themselves with now 20 years of lackluster history compared to starting from scratch like Atlanta and sort of catching lightning in a bottle in the market. That team has done much better than I anticipated. There was an NASL team in Atlanta, and it got no support. And I thought that Atlanta playing in an NFL stadium, that it was not going to be successful. Now we'll see where it is in 5 years, but it does illustrate when you get to start from scratch with where the sport has gone in the last 20 years, how much better of an opportunity you have. And I think you'll see the same thing in LA next year. So there are a lot of signs of growth, but I don't think we're getting enough growth where we need it. Sure. And that's on the youth level and lower division level.
And absolutely, Eric. And actually, the former head coach of the Cosmos, Gio Saravese, actually just left for Portland. And after his success at the Cosmos, I mean, he won 3 titles with you guys. What are your thoughts on Gio being able to prove himself in the MLS?
Well, I think there's so much that Gio doesn't get credit for. Everybody talks about what a great guy he is, what a great coach he is, and how much the players love him. That's all true, and we've developed a really good friendship, and I'm so happy for him. And I think he's going to a place where the fans are absolutely going to love him. I expect him to be very successful for some reasons. For some reasons that people don't discuss. So we've always been successful with recruiting players at the Cosmos, and a lot of it was on the strength of Gio's personality. He convinced people to play for less money in the second division, just to be part of what our culture was. We get a lot of criticism from fans. A lot of people don't really understand us in the NASL, and we're polarizing. But if you talk to players, they know how we've run our organization. It's been very professional. We treat everybody as if they're part of the family. That's been core to our identity when we started this 5 years ago, and Gio's a big part of that. And he'll bring that same thing to Portland. And I think that's a community where that will resonate. He'll bring players in that maybe they couldn't fit under the salary cap before, but maybe they can now because the people will want to play with him and they'll want to play his style of soccer. And I think the fans are absolutely going to love him. He speaks 5 languages.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of the highlights of my career. Like 3 years ago, I was standing outside the locker room with him. We were talking about stuff. It was a training day. And an Italian player came out, Nocelli, and he started talking to Nocelli in Italian. And then Reversio, a Brazilian player, came out. And he's speaking Portuguese to him. We're speaking English.
Yeah.
And then Marco Senna came out of the locker room, and he speaks Spanish to him. And I've seen it. I've seen it go really bad in locker rooms where the Spanish-speaking guys and the English-speaking guys get divided, and it's not a unified team. And he will not let that happen. And he is so good at man management and communicating with people. So I think Portland got a great guy. I think they're going to love him, and I'm very confident that they're going to be successful.
Well, we're really excited to see him in Portland. I guess it's a good sign that MLS clubs are starting to look at the lower divisions. I think there needs to be more of a connection as far as just even if you don't have promotion relegation, but being able to bring up players so you can get the youth. Be like, even if you start at a Division 3 or Division 2 club, you still have the opportunity to move up and play top level soccer in America and compete, hopefully for the national team colors, regardless of where you're from. But what's the direction? I know you guys, there's a pending lawsuit, but what are you hoping to come out of this lawsuit, or what's the direction for the Cosmo and the league?
Well, for the lawsuit, we have to get this preliminary injunction. Without it, I don't know how this league continues. There's a lot of interest with expansion markets, and we've had a lot of interest over the years. There are a lot of investors that like our business model better than the franchise model of the USL, but we've struggled with the instability of the league, with teams being poached out of our league, and until we can get this stability to have 2 or 3 years where the federation is going to help us and not either stay at arm's length or participate in teams being poached from us, it's going to be hard to keep growing. So this preliminary injunction would allow the league to continue. Without it, I don't know where it's going to go. It's not my decision. I'm an employee. I don't own a team. I'm not the commissioner. But it is a very critical time for us, and like everybody, I'm anxiously awaiting an answer.
Finish things off. I know you don't really have a necessarily a specific say in the U.S. Presidential race, but out of what you've seen so far, who's a candidate that, I don't want you to throw your support at anybody, but who's a candidate that you've liked their message so far?
Well, I haven't heard anything from Carlos Cordero. He seems to be working behind the scenes. So I'm not really sure what his platform is. I'm concerned about, Carlos voted against our sanctioning, so I'm concerned about him. I'm concerned about, as I said, the relationship between some MLS and U.S. soccer, and how I think that needs to be. There needs to be a divorce there. There needs to be independence. There needs to be fewer conflicts of interest. So, I'm concerned about those two candidates. I think Kyle Martino and Erik Winalda bring the understanding of the sport from a player's point of view. I think they've said good things about the challenges on the women's side. So I like both of those candidates. I'm not sure. There's a lot of I think indecisiveness on pro-rel out of everybody. Winalda's probably more supportive of it. So at the moment, I think I like what I hear out of those guys more. I'm probably leaning more towards the change that Winalda would like to bring. I don't really know much about Gans or Winograd. I do hope that, I think there's too many candidates. I think they need to start debating these issues. They need to meet with each other to see if there's a uniform platform that could carry the day and win the youth vote and the adult amateur and the athlete council and all those different voting contingencies. I think it's going to be a hectic 2 months, but I think there's just so much that needs to be fixed that hasn't been addressed, and we're paying for it now.
Well, Erik, we want to thank you so much. And here on the show, we call it the shameless plug. I know we can follow you on Twitter at Erik Stower NYC. But is there any other places you wanted to plug? Maybe the Cosmos or anywhere else?
Yeah, well, obviously, hopefully the Cosmos are playing next year, so we're at nycosmos.com. And as you mentioned, I'm on Twitter at Erik, E-R-I-K, Stover, NYC. So you can follow me there. I try to be open and transparent, answer questions, particularly the nice questions. And if you're a Cosmos fan, I try to, if you get a cold hot dog at a game or a warm beer, I try to fix those problems too. So you can find me there.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate it, and you definitely have opened our eyes to the lower division as we continue to do our research and to find out more about the U.S. structure of soccer.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It was a good time.
Awesome.
Thanks, Erik.
Thank you, Erik.